Hello, everyone. Welcome back, and welcome if you are joining for the first time. This is IT Training 2030, Part 2, More Training, Less Impact. Today is not about new tools or more content. It's about one question. If the system is not working, why do we keep choosing the same approach? We will start with a quick self-check poll on your current IT learning strategy. Then we will walk through 5 common myths that keeps training stuck at access instead of real integration into daily work. We will contrast myths and evidence, and we will name the pattern behind the gap, capability drift, when knowledge grows but operation do not change. This session is led by Clara, business researcher and developer at 𝗕𝗿𝗀𝗰, and the author of the IT Training 2030 case study. Clara will guide you through the topic, the examples and the polls, and you can test your own system as we go. And with that, Clara, over to you. You're on the stage right now.
Thank you, Aslihan, and welcome back to everyone who joined our first webinar, and a warm welcome to everyone who is here for the first time. As Aslihan already mentioned, this is our webinar series about our recent case study, which was about IT Trainings 2030. And it's very important for us to stress at the beginning that the study is based on our own research experience and perspective. So, of course, there's not only a single right answer. But I hope that the study and our insights give you the opportunity to reflect a bit on yourself, on your own perspective, and to see things maybe in a different light. As a little recap, in our first webinar, we explored traditional IT trainings and why they reached their structural limits. There were 3 main structural patterns we have discovered that were found over and over again. The first one was that learning happens outside real workflows. This was, probably the biggest problem companies encountered. Then the second one is that usually trainings are designed as a one-time event, even though sometimes, of course, they go a couple of days, but still it was a separate event and it was not integrated in the continuous process. And again, that's why it was not as effective as it should be. And the third observation we made was that success is usually measured by the participation numbers, but not by the performance that followed after the training. Today, our shift is a bit different. We focus more on the empirical evidence, the research sides of the things, and we look at typical beliefs and myths we have, as well as evidence that either supports it or kind of questions the beliefs we have. To help you get started with your own thinking process for today, I would like to invite you to reflect a little bit on your current situation. The first question we have is, how would you describe your IT training strategy? There are 4 answers available. Feel free to share your answer in the comment section or write it down on paper. That's totally up to you. Take a moment here. Okay, so the most important question, of course, is why is all of this important for the future of IT training? And I can tell you that we have reached a turning point. The skills we need at work changed a lot. We have AI taking over a couple of tasks, roles, and systems in our companies. And it's fair to say that new tools enter the market every day, and we need to adjust a lot more quickly than we used to in the past. And at the same time, we have a lot more time pressure than before, and a combination of all of this leads to a big change. And it's important that companies prepare for all of that. But one thing that is very important and that it's a lot of times misunderstood is that more activity does not automatically create more impact. So adding more courses to our portfolio is not the direct solutions for a bigger skill set. And yeah, that already brings us to the first belief we have that might not be true, but we will get back to that in a bit. So the relevance for future of IT training, you can also read it now on the slide once more, shows why all of this matters. Yeah, the main issue is that companies struggle to afford learning that simply doesn't pay off. And that's very normal. We have teams that needs new skills that they really want to apply, but badges are not enough here. So the actual skills are needed, and manager need visible impact. They should not only focus on participation numbers. And that's something that should be very clear, but still in reality, it sometimes doesn't happen the way we want it to be. And our focus today is we shift a little bit away from why it fails and look more into what actually works instead. Let's look at a very common situation for that. Many organizations have or are strong on access. They have huge portfolios. They have a lot of courses for their employees available, but even though they offer it, they a lot of times struggle with the integration. And in the integration, we really see the behavioral change of our employees that we want in order to improve the company's efforts and results. And this is where we should focus the most on, that the access is not enough, and instead we should also really put effort into the integration. In our case study, we have a bunch of myths and that we explored and always tried to unfold them by using empirical evidence. I've chosen 5 myths that I want to present today and give you a first impression on what the empirical evidence behind it looks like. Feel free to check out the case study after the webinar if you want to learn more about them. The 5 myths we are looking at today are: more courses close the skill gap, then the certificates alone are not enough. We have a 3rd myth, a 4th myth, and a 5th myth, but I will get into detail in the next steps. So the first myth we have is: more courses close the skill gap. We can see that, or it's actually a clear picture that the skill gap grows. This is also because our projects get more complex and the pressure increases steadily. And the first reaction to that is usually, oh, let's book more courses, which sounds logical in the beginning, but it's not enough that if the skills are missing that we simply train more. Instead, the research has shown that training volume, so the amount of courses, does not predict the impact in the end. Instead, I've added a graphic to the slide where you can see that the lowest impact can be discovered in the training volume, and there's more impact, a higher impact in the work environment support and in the opportunity to apply skills. So basically, the steps that follow after the trainings are even more important than a training itself. So the key message of this slide is that if we have more courses alone, this doesn't influence our performance enough. Its impact really depends on the support and the real application following the training. You can also see that on this slide once more. We have the myth on the left and the evidence on the right side here. That already brings us to our second belief, that a certificate alone proves impact. It's a very common scenario that a team finishes a training and everyone gets the badge, posts this on LinkedIn, but the HR number that is recorded in the end of people successfully completing that training does not tell us anything about the performance after. So we have the certificate that proves the knowledge, but nothing is shown about the impact by doing that. And the fact that certificates, of course, show you the knowledge in the best scenario possible is nothing that needs to be questioned, but the problem is more that we never have the really stressful situations in a training. So there's trainings where you need to make decisions under pressure, and the real problem with all the negative impacts from outside is not facing reality in the trainings. So the research shows that role clarity, so having clear defined roles, predicts more strongly the latter job performance than the certification alone. So what we see here is that instead of just having one certification after the other, we should define the roles of our employees a lot more clear, so that everyone knows exactly what to do. The learning that happens in the training needs to be connected to responsibility from the beginning onwards. And once the employee returns back to the company, this connection needs to be clear. On the left side, we have the myth once more, and then you can compare to the evidence on the right side. The ownership, the real role definition is what really matters here for the second belief. I also brought another example. This is our 𝗖𝗂𝗶𝘂 course that we also have in our portfolio. It's starting with a foundation level and continues with an advanced level. You have a bunch of exams here, and at the first glance, it looks very structured and professional, which it also is. I really believe in that system. However, the key question remains, where do we define what the participant in the end is responsible for? And even in a clear structured certification path, just like the 𝗖𝗂𝗀𝗶𝘂 one, it's very important that we create clear ownership in the end. And again, if we don't put that new role, the new learned certification skill, whatever, if we don't connect it to responsibility, the impact in the end will be very low, as the employee won't feel responsible for it. It's time for another self-reflection question. The next question we have is, what most often blocks impact in your own organization? What do you usually experience? Is it the lack of budget? Is it motivation? Is it lack of time? Or is it the missing reinforcement? Take a moment here. Again, you can use the comment section or use a sheet of paper. In fact, most people believe that budget is the main bottleneck. They usually hear from their bosses, from the leaders of a company, we need more budget in order to fulfill all your learning goals. And of course, in the beginning, this sounds logical. But employees say that something else blocks development even more, and that's not money, it's in fact time. And it's from questionnaires, you can tell that employees usually have the problem that they don't really know when to do all the trainings, as everything is always very packed. They have delivery pressure, and the budget here again creates access, but the time would create change, but the time is sadly not really there. One platform that is usually investigating that question is the LinkedIn Workplace Learning Report. It's taking place every year, and here you can also show the same results, that 50% or more than 50% of the participants filling out that questionnaire report that they struggle with a lack of time, and the budget constraints are only reported by 10% of the participants. Again, you can also see that here very clearly on the slide. The time is really the enabler of the training that the employees want to take part in. Then we are already at our first myth. In many companies, the decisions in the learning field are sitting with HR. That's another issue, because if you think of your own company, I think the answer is not that HR is doing all the performance and the projects in the company. The performance actually happens in the projects, in the system, in the real delivery work. And if learning only stays a topic of HR, it might stay far from impact, as sometimes HR does not have the right perspective on learning here. There were also a couple of questionnaires and reports on that. I've added the World Economic Forum questionnaire here. You can see that 44% of core skills will change throughout different domains. And it's a fact that people grow faster when they change the context they are in sometimes. So if they change between systems of a company, projects or challenges, and a strong organizational rotation helps them sometimes a lot more in growing than simply doing one certification after the other. And that's why it should not only be an HR topic, it should also be always in discussion with the different domains of the company in order to have the best results here. Can also see it once more on this slide here. And then we continue with our fifth myth. Knowledge first, application later. It usually happens like that you have the course, after the course you do the exam, and the application should be the final step, but the application in the end never happens. Companies usually say that it's something that happens later, but we know all the reality in everyday life in an organization. The deadlines increase, priorities shift, and the newly learned skills don't really come alive. And if weeks pass, skills that might have been helpful are forgotten. Another empirical evidence on that one, we have the short-term performance that focus on immediate results and leads to a weak retention. And then we have the long-term learning that is about practicing and retrieval over and over again across weeks, and in the end leads to stronger competence. The evidence here shows that people improve through practice and feedback, and that without having this reinforcement, which you can only get if you train it over and over again, the knowledge fades very quickly. And the real question here is not, did we train them? It's actually, where do we see the skills in action? So we should always make sure that the participants can really use the skills they have learned in order to make sure that they stick with them. Here you can see an overview of the myth and evidence that we have discussed in today's webinar once more. And here I want to go one step back for you to see all the 5 myths together, and to discover a clear pattern that is visible here. what can be shown when we take a closer look to the myth, we can see that learning creates impact only when it's built into something, how work is really designed. So we should not make an artificial learning room or something, or it should not be added on top. It should really be integrated into the work in order to make it a success. And if we make two separate things from it, it's very clear that the impact can only be very small, as it's not the actual life where it's learned in. It's more the fictional, perfect world that is sometimes very far from reality. So the conclusion we have here is learning works when it's built into work. It should not be seen as a separate thing. It should not be added on top. It should not tracked separately, not isolated in HR dashboards. It should really be part of the everyday life of an employee. And if that's not possible in the full picture, it can also be done in very small steps here. We have another conclusion on this slide. As long as you measure participation, you will get participation. And as long as you measure certificates, you will get certificates. So here it's clear you should really focus on the measure usage to have that behavior change we want from certifications. Let's make this a bit more practical. There's no major transformation needed in your organization to accomplish that goal. Just 3 shifts we want to highlight. First one is to integrate learning into workflows. Before approving a training, always ask yourself, where will this show up in a short run? Maybe even next week, in which meeting can this be used, in which decisions is this valuable? And if there's no clear answer to that, the impact will be low, and the learning should be shifted more into everyday work. Then we have the second structural shift that should be made, which is start with roles, not with courses, or in other words, align learning with role ownership. Here it's very important to clarify the responsibilities first. Who decides, who owns, who is accountable? That can be done before the training or after the training. Just make sure that the roles are clearly defined at the very end, so that certificates not only show qualifications, but also create performance and responsibility. And the third shift that should be made is protect time, not just the budget. We have seen that budget creates access, and time in the end is the factor that creates change. And even small times or blocks that you can use for learning matter. And without having that protected times, employees really struggle in delivering or showing the new skills they have learned. And that's, the 3 factors you should really focus on when starting to implement that into your real life organization, everyday work. To finish off this meeting, I have another story for you to tell that should give you another light on this topic and might make it easier for some of you to grasp. I want you to imagine a very modern office building now, and the company that works in that building invested heavily in fire safety training. And on paper, everything looks perfect. Every participant completed the modules, passed the test, and is aware of the scenario when a fire happens. But now a real fire breaks out, and people start hesitating. They look around. They are unsure who's in charge. They, fearful look at their bosses, their decision makers, and nobody knows what to do. And now the big question is, was the fire training wrong? Did the instructor not explain the concept correct? Or what is the problem? But the problem was not the training itself. Here again, the roles were very unclear, the coordination was unclear, everything in theory was fine, but how it looks in the praxis, in real life, was never really discussed. And that kind of shows in another example that the training did not change how the system works under pressure. It didn't really show the real life. It showed how it looks in a perfect, safe scenario, but not when the escalation happens. And the participants or employees in the end did not know what to do and how to coordinate that emergency now. And that's a metaphor for the difference between knowledge and capability, and shows once more why it's always important to think about the scenario until the end and not only the theoretical part, because what in the end matters is the implementation, and to help the participants not fall back into old patterns and instead change the behavior into something more effective. And with that, I would like to end this webinar today. Thank you all for taking part. We hope to see you in the third part again.
Thank you, Clara, for your valuable information and explanation. And thanks for staying with us today. This was part 2 of our IT Training 2030 series. And in the next part, in part 3, we will move from diagnosis to action, a clear game plan that shows where to start, what to change first, and how to measure progress without hiding behind input metrics. We will share the date and details on our channels. You can follow 𝗕𝗏𝘂𝗃 on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, X, and Reddit. And if you want to go deeper, the full case study includes the visuals, the evidence base, and the full game plan. And we will share the English and German report links after the session. And thanks again for joining, and thank you, Clara, for leading today's discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you.